Thanks, Kevin. Thanks very much. All right. Morning. Fantastic. So first of all, I must apologize for putting Kevin and you through that elongated bio. It's part of my contract, and there's also a bowl full of blue M&Ms at the back I can share with you later. So the most important thing for you to maybe take away is I've been focused on this area for like 15 years, and I'm going to be joined by a couple of really, really awesome guys who are going to share some practical stories about how to make all this work. Before I'm joined by the other guys and we have our conversation on stage, I've got about 9 minutes, 21 seconds to talk you through some intro. And as Kevin said, we really are seeing what I think is a new kind of toolkit for driving automation in business in service of digital transformation. That's a lot to kind of put in one sentence, so I'll try and explain what's really going on, and maybe more importantly, why it's so important, right? So you've heard a lot already from Appian about how Appian's technology can help drive business transformation, how it can drive automation, do all that good stuff. I'm going to try and put a little bit more kind of flavor into that mix and share with you some of the insights we've gained from IDC. So I could probably spend about an hour just talking about this chart, but I don't have long. It's a complicated space, this whole automation space, this whole digital transformation space. Lots and lots of organizations come at digital transformation from different angles. Right? There's really no one answer in terms of where you start or how you progress. But what we are finding is some very common themes around the kinds of platform people are trying to build and how they're trying to get there. And there's lots of different ways of trying to explain how the automation landscape is changing. There's loads of different kinds of diagrams you can draw. So I acknowledge this isn't a perfect diagram. There's some things about it that are not quite right. But hopefully, just in a kind of cartoonish kind of sense, you get an idea of what's going on. So what I've tried to show here is, fundamentally, we've got some stuff at the top which is really sexy and hot and gets everyone excited. It's all over like airline magazines and business magazines. And then you've got some stuff at the bottom which is really, really important, but actually, for a lot of people, it's dull as ditch water. It's really, really important, right? And you've got this stuff all coming together, right? So lots and lots of interest from executives we talk to around RPA, around AI. Sometimes not so much practical understanding of what's really possible. And then underneath, we've got, in most large organizations at least, very, very clearly established practices around integration platforms and workflow and BPM. But it's important for everybody who provides technology in this space to recognize that the others add value, and it's important for you to realize that all of this stuff has to come together. The answer is not just about workflow and BPM. It's absolutely not just about RPA. It's absolutely, absolutely not just about AI. Right? All of this stuff adds value, the new and the old. And on the right-hand side, we have technology which is traditionally used for trying to figure out what is the action we should take when we're automating and driving work. What's the next thing that should be done, and making sure that that is kind of teed up for somebody or some system to work on. All right, so that's another way of looking at this diagram, is the stuff on the right is all about figuring out what we should do next. And on the left, it's just about doing it. And as I said, this isn't a perfect diagram, but it's one way of showing how these things all complement each other, and maybe how you can start to explain their value to your peers and to sponsors for your projects. The other thing that we're noticing very, very clearly, and I'm sure you will have also taken away from the Appian sessions and the client sessions here, is this shift across the whole space towards a low-code way of building things and changing things. I think it's often thought that low-code is really just about the workflow piece. But if you think about it, so unfortunately I've now obscured the diagram, we have workflow, integration platforms, RPA, and AI. If you take the time to look at what's happening in all four of those spaces, the idea of low-code approaches, or is fundamentally getting more stuff done with less effort, more kinds of declarative style of development, more graphical development, more cooperative and collaborative development. That change, that vector of change is hitting all 4 of those technology segments. All of them are becoming low code. Whether we're talking about workflow and BPM, whether we're talking about app dev, integration platforms, API management, RPA, AI, all of them are becoming democratized. They're becoming able to be driven more collaboratively. And that's a huge, huge deal. And we're going to talk about that with my guests a little bit more in a sec. But why is this so important? Why should you care? The first thing is I'm going to talk very briefly about digital transformation. A lot of people, when I say those words, they kind of roll their eyes and they say, oh, really? Are we still talking about that? But I think certainly in my experience with clients, it may not be a sexy thing to talk about in the media, but it sure as heck is still a live issue, I would guess, for most of you in your organizations. It's still happening, and it's really, really crucial to get it right. And we're finding that this pressure is even getting up to CEOs. In fact, in our research, so we did a big, big study of executives last year, and we found that just under 2/3 of them were clear in stating that they have significant pressure. So this is the most senior executives under significant pressure to deliver real business results from all of those digital investments. So it's not just about creating innovation labs, doing funky new stuff with IoT or AI. Now it's time to get real and deliver real results. So there's pressure coming down from the top. What we're also finding is that organizations will tell us pretty universally that what they're trying to get to is some kind of platform for digital transformation where they can create closed loops of insight from products and services and processes that are digital, driving that insight back into an intelligent core platform and using that to drive improved action taking. So we have this kind of this infinite loop, this closed loop of being able to take instrumentation from digital products and services and processes, get insights out of them, and then find new ways to improve or innovate, and just do that again and again and again. And that's at the core of what it really means to digitally transform. But this is kind of like nirvana. This is where most people, if I get a chance to talk to them, will tell me they want to get to something that feels a bit like this. But what we're also finding is that a lot of organizations are stuck. Around about 71% of organizations tell us that they really are, they're not managing to get past a kind of midpoint of maturity. It's easy to start up new innovation projects. It's easy to start up new digital programs. What's really, really hard is to connect all of the new stuff, those islands of innovation. It's really tough to connect them to the core of what happens in IT. And it's only by connecting those things together you really get to scale the advantages you're seeing from your innovations and driving true transformation. This is a huge deal. Yeah, connecting together the old and the new, connecting together the slow and the fast, connecting together the core and the edge. It's only by doing those things that you can really scale innovation and drive real kind of large-scale change. And lastly, what we also know is that organizations know that they have to drive digital skills into all parts of their business. We can't rely on one group to drive all this. There's too much to do. We have to have involvement from across lines of business, IT, digital specialties, partners. We all have to come together collaboratively to drive success. So although there's clear understanding that we need to get digital transformation skills into all parts of the business, there's another huge problem, and I would be willing to bet money that you are all feeling this to some extent too, which is a huge skills challenge. And we're finding that in Europe, at least where I'm from, there's a colossal skills gap. Whether you're talking about app dev, data, scientist skills, security skills, and so on, it's everywhere. And we're predicting that actually by 2020, it could be that around 91 billion of revenue won't be realized by European businesses because of this skills shortage. So think about all these things together. Pressure to drive digital transformation coming from the top. A new automation landscape where we've got lots of bits and pieces of automation innovation, but we can't really pull them together. And a challenge around skills. How do we solve all those three things at once? Well, you know what? You guys are all able to do that because of the work you're doing with platforms like Appian's. You think about what Appian and other platforms like that can do, can help solve all of those challenges. That's why what we are collectively doing is so important. All right, so I want to take a pause there, and now I'm going to call out Vinay from LexisNexis and Asim from Honeywell. I think we'll see Asim first, and we're going to sit down and talk about some of the practicalities of getting this right. So please put your hands together for Asim and Vinay.
Hello, Neil.
Hi, Vinay.
Good morning.
Hi, Asim. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So I've built you up quite extraordinarily there, so no pressure.
All right.
Just move this around a little. So I want to just briefly start off by asking these gentlemen to introduce themselves. So Asim, do you want to go first and explain a little bit about what it is you're doing and the role you play within Honeywell?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Good morning. So I'm one of the process transformation leaders in what we call enterprise information management, right? It's not a technology group as such. It's actually a purely business-focused group, which is kind of under the umbrella of what we call the enterprise business transformation, pure business transformation. And how can BPM enable that transformation? That's where we come in. We kind of enable that for the rest of the group.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. And Vinay?
Yeah. In my role, there are three major focus areas. One is to drive the automation strategy for the company, working with the CEO and the other CXOs of the company. The second is to build core capabilities across emerging domains like artificial intelligence, robotic automation, and business process management, and basically tie this with process excellence and continuous improvement. And thirdly, it is to build a culture of change so that we can sustain the automation outcomes.
Fantastic. And for those people here who don't know, most people maybe know a little what Honeywell does, but just briefly explain.
Thermostats. They always think about the thermostats.
Right,
Honeywell,
right.
But we do a lot more than that, by
right?
the way.
Yeah.
You know? We've got aerospace, which is huge for us. We've got the petroleum side, the gas, and all that. Mm-hmm. We've got the building technologies, right? I mean the productivity solutions. It's pretty diverse and complex, large across the covering a broad spectrum of products for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And now LexisNexis is.
Yeah. So LexisNexis is an information and analytics firm, and we are part of the Reed Elsevier umbrella. We serve governments, corporations, and law firms across 100+ countries. And our biggest asset is the legal and news content that we carry, which is almost 150 times the size of Wikipedia, and we carry 65 billion documents, and that's our biggest differentiator in the market.
How many documents?
65 billion documents.
Billion. I was just checking I heard
yes.
right. Billion.
Billion, yes.
Right. Okay, that's a lot of documents. Okay. So I sense AI is going to come into the conversation.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about the practicalities of how we make this work. Right? So we've already said it's a fast-moving area. There's a lot of technology, hype, and excitement, and also a lot of pressure that we need to try and relieve in organizations. So when we prepped this, we thought we'd start off by start at the high level and then kind of work down to the more practical.
Sure.
So as we talk about and think about the practicalities of overcoming barriers with these technologies and really driving the benefits out, I thought we'd start by talking about the importance of business education and sponsorship. So I know this has been a really key point for you, Asim. Do you want to talk a bit more about what you've learned in the work you've done?
Oh, absolutely. For us, we are a very, I would say, business-driven organization. Results have to matter. So if you go in and talk about, hey, this is the technology that I have, and this is what I can do, it doesn't fly very well with them, right? It's more about, okay, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? And how can you use the technology to solve that? So you've got to start off with what strategy is, what are the key KPIs, what are the processes that are enabling it, and then you talk about then, okay, what technology tool sets that you've got that can enable that, right? It's one of those things there. I always think of technology as an accelerator, an enabler, But you really have to start from the business side. That's what we've been focusing on from our side.
Okay, and I know that, I mean, crucial, my understanding is that crucial to your success has been your ability to educate and deliver kind of in parallel, right? It's not one and then the other.
That's right. We kind of educate and execute at the same time.
Right.
We can't take 6 months to educate and 9 months to execute. It's a combination of both at the same time. So that's the key thing for us. Yeah.
And presumably then a toolkit that allows you to be agile and collaborative and kind of work in front of the user and the customer. That's
exactly right. I mean, if you think of your business think of it as a caterpillar, right? And if you apply technology to that, it's going to transform that into a butterfly.
Okay.
Yeah? That's what you're looking for. And if you apply the technology and it becomes just crawling and walking, you haven't transformed it. You're just doing something that feels good.
Right.
So the idea is how to use the technology to transform that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And Vinay, is there anything you want to add on that point around the importance of education and sort of driving sponsorship?
Yeah, it's all about sustainability. You can do one project, 2 projects, and you can say that we did great. But if you really want to make automation as a part of your culture and sustainability and a core competitive advantage for your firm, then we need to build this within the employee skills, and we should remove the barriers in terms of the mental blocks that many of the folks have in terms of skill sets, in terms of adoption, in terms of transformation. So for us, it's all about continuous education, and a big part of my focus is to educate various levels of leadership in the company.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving down one level, I mean, one of the things I've really enjoyed about talking to you guys in our prep sessions has been this focus on value. And so often when we talk about this kind of technology, the first thing everybody thinks about is it's just about cost and efficiency. But what you guys are showing in your work is that it's just one of a number of things we can try and do, right? So, I mean, Asim, do you want to talk a little bit about how you're working internally to drive this?
Right. So technology is nice to have for us. I mean, cost cutting is nice to have. It's good. But what we really focus on are some of how does it help you with working capital? How does it work with your revenue? How does it help you open new markets, channels, right? Mm-hmm. What are the new business models that it can help you with? Mm-hmm. So when you talk in those terms, that's what matters to business. Cost is, you're going to cut it. Of course you're going to cut it, right? That's not it. But how can you increase your top line? That's where we can come in with a BPM and talk about how the processes and technologies can enable that.
Right.
But that's been the focus for us in terms of the value drivers.
Right, right. And I'm going to come to you in a sec, Vinay, and ask you about your thinking on this. But while we're on the topic and with you, so we're talking about different ways of delivering value, I know that there's a project you've been working on that really shows, right, the famous, as we know now, the 6-week story.
Actually, it was 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
It was 4 weeks.
Okay.
Well, we had to delay because of the New Year.
Okay.
Christmas, the infrastructure shuts down. So, but we were done in 4 weeks actually, right?
Right.
And that's the beauty of the Appian thing. We were able to get so we are very deliberate in process side. We need to take our time to figure out what the process is. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to execution, when we know what the tool is, then the speed picks up. And it was 4 weeks for us in that case there.
So talk to me just briefly about what it is you actually did in that 4-week period.
It was primarily, our key, again, the thing was, let's take the time to figure out what the requirements are for Appian. Let's figure out what the right use case is. Let's figure out what we're going to achieve coming out of the use case, right? And that was our focus was. And once we had that figured out, then it was very quickly get the partner in, get the requirements done, let the execution start, and focus on that very quickly.
Right.
So again, the focus started off with the business requirements. What do you get out of it, the success criteria, and then very quickly get that executed.
And this was specifically around kind of premium freight, I think.
Premium freight, which was around
case.
that, exactly. How do you reduce complexity of supply chain?
Right.
That's what our focus was there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's a great illustration of how it's not just about cost, but actually about agility, true agility.
True agility, right. And how fast you can execute on it, right? And get the results delivered very quickly, not wait 6 months.
Yeah, fantastic. So Vinay, let's come back to you. And I know you've got, you talk about 4 value drivers.
Right.
I think this is really worth sharing. So talk us through it.
Sure. When we adopted automation as a core enterprise strategy, we had to create enough value levers for our enterprise. Otherwise, people are not really appreciating why automation is important for us. And we had to make it more democratic in the sense everyone should be able to create value. And it's not always the cost. Cost is sometimes a threatening factor because if you put too much pressure on cost, the runway ends very short. After that, you can't cut costs anymore. Yeah. So we had to create a runway which was long enough and it can be sustainable in the longer run. So we looked at what other options and alternatives we have from a value standpoint. So one of the big value from automation is the speed to market of your products and services. So if you look at every process and value chain, which is dependent on humans and knowledge and data handling, invariably we have thrown humans in the front, and they create a lot of bottlenecks, because when we operate as more of a human-centric organization, we don't know where the process is, we cannot respond to customers, and likewise it creates a lot of bottlenecks. So when we bring automation, speed becomes a very big enabler for us. Second is the quality. I mean, everything we do has to be of highest quality. We have service level agreements. If we can't automate, we can't measure. So quality is fundamental value driver from an automation standpoint. And the third is, which is far more futuristic and long running, is the revenue and product innovation. So we have started bringing automation as an add-on to our information products and analytics products, so that we can get further into the customer value chain and become more glued into the customer organizations. So we are disrupting many of our existing philosophies in terms of how we can create more value through automation.
Right. So, I mean, this is really, really key point, right? So the last one particularly you talked about around product innovation. It's not just about back office stuff. This is really about enabling new business models.
Right.
It's kind of, we talk about the Internet of Things. This is kind of Internet of Knowledge, almost, you know, just really connecting these knowledge value chains together in a very intimate way. So it's
absolutely. Just to add to that point is, if you look at our sales and marketing teams, they are spread all over the geographies. And the only way we can help the sales team to be more efficient, more smarter, is to provide them with automated tools and techniques so that they can serve the customer better and also be more knowledgeable, get information in real time at their fingertips. And that is where automation plays a big part.
Right. Yeah. And I know there's another thing that we were talking about very briefly, which is the deal review use case.
Yeah, that's
It's another great illustration of different ways to look at value, right?
Yeah. So in one of the geographies, we had a major challenge in the deal review process. We cover about 35,000 deals in a given year. And when we looked at the process had literally, it used to take about sometimes 1 week to all the way to 4 weeks to present a deal to the customer. And that's a big barrier to our revenue cycle time. And our sales teams were so frustrated because at any point of time, nobody knew where the deal was in terms of the approval cycles. So when we automated this process, we really shrunk the deal review cycle time by more than 80%. And incidentally, Appian was at the heart of this automation. And it is not only improving the Salesforce productivity, but from a customer experience standpoint, today customers can get the deals much faster in their hands, and any type of iterations are more seamless. So that's a phenomenal change that we did for the geography as a whole.
Very, very cool. So I feel like we could almost kind of give up there and go home, because it's already really, really great insight. But I know there's more stuff that we can share around some of the practical challenges of landing this and really driving it through. So I know I need to give you a little bit of a rest, because you've talked for a while there. So Asim, in terms of the change management side, you know, so fear is often a big part of what comes up, right? So fear of changing environments and so on. And also sometimes organizations it's almost the opposite. They get kind of too gung-ho, too excited about what the technology can do. They think it can solve every problem. Nice. There's some sort of practical insights that you've got around some of that.
So for us, the change management starts from the process. So once you figure out what the process is going to be, you got to figure out what the organization structure is going to be around it, right? Right. So it becomes a very integral part of that BPM or the discipline that we've got. You talk about the process, you talk about the people, you talk about the data, and you package it together, and you say, well, it's not right for the technology to come in. But that change management happens when you bring in all the right people from the very beginning to discuss the process design. So for us, that's been a key thing. When you design the models and everything, that's part of the whole equation. Right. You've got to bring them in from the beginning, not as a result of the process design. Right, right. So I would say that would be one of the key findings for us is make sure they're part of the business, is part of the design of the process, and so is the HR. Right, right, right. That matter. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's another thing that brings us back to the whole, the value of low code, right? This being able to work in front of the customer, work in front of the user, work collaboratively to be able to bring people right in from the start. That's really important, right? Yeah, that's in the technology phase. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I'm talking way before technology, right? You're in the process design phase. You got to bring the HR and the people in from the very beginning so they buy in. What skills are going to be impacted in those tasks there?
Right.
And then, yes, when you have the technology in, then you get them involved in the design of the tool itself as well. It starts much earlier in the process.
Yeah, okay. And Vinay, I know you've got some interesting experience to share as well, specifically on the fear of change thing and working with HR. So can you tell the audience a bit about what you've done there? It was pretty interesting.
Sure. So when we started promoting automation across the enterprise, and the CEO and the chief operating officer and other leaders started talking about automation, generally there was a sense of fear in many of the operations teams and even some of the technology folks, partly because they thought automation is going to take away the jobs. And especially when you have more of a knowledge-driven company where you have knowledge workers across your value chains, I mean, there's a big fear that how it's going to impact the jobs. And for us, it was a multi-pronged approach in terms of, one is to help educate what does automation mean for the company and why it is important for us. And when our employees started understanding the value of automation, the first thing is like they realize if we don't automate as a company, we are not going to stand in the market. So it's not about individuals, it's about the company's survival. The second is we need to put to rest all the fears that the employees had, because our primary focus was not to take away the jobs, but to make them more productive and move up the value chain in terms of how they can serve the customers better. And the third aspect was about making sure automation is not a prerogative of a small group of technologists. We made it completely democratized. Our RPA and BPM developments are happening in the business groups right now. They are led by the business and operations team. Technology is more of an enabler here. So when people start owning the automation projects, the fear starts to come down, thinking that it's not against us, but it is for us.
Right, and I think this is a really interesting insight, right? Because I've seen in the engagements we've done, there's two different ways of looking at this. One is very much a kind of a process-first mindset where if you're not careful, I'm not saying this always happens, but if you're not careful, you can start to see people as just costs that need to be stripped out. Right. The other is more of a people-first mindset, right, where we're actually looking at how can we, it's not how can we take people out of the work, it's how can we take work away from the people. Right. So we're kind of, it's much more of a positive enablement story, right, and much less of a, oh, jeepers, you know, let's just cut cost. And I think that those situations tend to drive more sustainable results, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah, and just to point out on the HR aspect of it, all the way up to the executive vice president and chief human resource officer, this has become a major agenda for us. How do we make sure that we drive the right messaging across the employees so that there is no fear factor about automation?
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we're pretty much on time. Look, 2.5 minutes.
You did a good job.
See, we didn't think that was going to happen. So in the last couple of minutes, I'd love to get from each of you a couple of quick kind of pearls of wisdom. So what's the one or maybe two things that you would say are the kind of key takeaways that you've learned from your time working on these automation projects? Asim, do you want to start?
Start with business and work your way to technology. Don't go with the technology and start figuring out what the business is going to be impacted by that. Mm-hmm. If you take that, you will make some progress, but you'll never be successful. Start with the business and then figure out what technology tool is going to help you. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing that I can tell has been the most, I think, important for us.
Okay. Yes. Fantastic. Vinay?
Yeah. I would only leave a message in terms of looking at the holistic picture. When we do automation, usually we are very tempted to look at what a particular tool provides us and applying it to a part of the business problem. But then when you take a step back, the problem could be much bigger and wider. So always don't go with the technology as a focus area, but look at the big picture, look at the end-to-end process on how the value gets delivered. And then also don't put all your eggs into one technology, because the technology is probably going to be made up of multiple components. Mm-hmm. Like you're trying to automate knowledge, you're trying to automate processes, you're trying to automate data handling. So maybe there's no single technology which can solve all the problems. So look at holistically the bigger problem set, bring the right technologies and orchestrate them across the process. That's my advice.
Very good.
Yeah.
So let's just recap. So we talked about business education. Mm-hmm. We talked about how important it is to be able to educate and execute in parallel.
That's right.
Yeah. We talked about really understanding. I think this is, like, we can't emphasize this enough almost, that although it might be natural to immediately think of cost and efficiency, number one focus, actually there's really strong stories here to explore around innovation, around risk and visibility.
New business models.
Absolutely new business models. So when thinking about automation, when thinking about digital technologies, we can't just think in a kind of like a closed mindset. We have to be open to new possibilities.
That's right.
Then we talked about the human side, right? So we also talked about trying to help organizations overcome fear around what automation will do.
Yeah.
We talked about, again, linking it to the business and making sure we've got the context right, and only then really being able to solve for particular problems with the right toolkit in mind.
Yeah.
So, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you've all found it useful. I hope it's been a good start to your day. I hope we've been low-key enough so that your heads don't hurt, because I suspect there may be a few delicate people out there. And I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Absolutely.